health, anti-racism, and access to care. Jasmine is passionate about bridging clinical practice with global health education and community-driven solutions. Please, a round of applause as we welcome Jasmine. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's stop. Yes. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Jasmine Verk, like I was told to you. I'm a fourth-year nursing student at the University of Alberta. And again, thank you so much for being here today and being part of these discussions. My research is titled Trauma, Grief, and Reproductive Decision-Making, a secondary analysis of internally displaced women in Africa. And it was completed under the expert guidance and supervision of Dr. Oluwakwemi Modu from the Faculty of Nursing. So just as a background for this topic, each year, millions of people are forced into displacement, where survival often overrides choice. Unlike refugees, internally displaced people, or IDPs as mentioned in the slide, remain within their home countries while fleeing conflict or persecution. As a statistic, by 2024, 73.5 million people were internally displaced worldwide, and women and children make up about 80% of that population, which speaks to how important this conversation is. Despite this, the gendered impacts of displacement remain significantly underexplored, particularly in relation to reproductive decision-making. For women, displacement disrupts far more than housing or physical safety. It disrupts reproductive autonomy in very specific ways. We'll be referencing reproductive decision-making throughout the slideshow, and just as context, that refers to the timing of pregnancies, the spacing between births, the number of children, and access to contraception, abortion, and maternal health care. Research consistently shows that unplanned pregnancies, maternal mortalities, and morbidity increases significantly during crisis. However, without considering women's own narratives, humanitarian responses risk being very paternalistic and may miss opportunities to deliver care that's actually culturally meaningful and contextually relevant. So this gap in literature is what ended up motivating my research. Existing literature clearly demonstrates that displacement and conflict reduce access to health services, potable water, safe living conditions, all of which generally will increase and elevate reproductive health risks. Many studies already document negative reproductive outcomes, such as maternal and infant mortality, but much of this work focuses a lot on system-level barriers, health infrastructure, or service availability. What is missing are women's perspectives. Very few studies examine how women themselves navigate risk, exercise agency, and negotiate cultural, religious, and structural constraints when displaced. In other words, we know that outcomes are worse, but we know far less about how women themselves make decisions in these contexts. This led to my central research question: how do internally displaced women navigate reproductive decision-making in the context of trauma, grief, and survival? The objective of the study was to advance understanding of the key factors that influence reproductive decision-making among internally displaced women in Nigeria, West Africa, by centering these lived experiences. For methods, the study employed a qualitative secondary analysis approach. So my research professor, Dr. Oluwakwemi Modu, had done these interviews as part of a prior maternal health study that she had done. So I analyzed those 29 in-depth interviews with internally displaced women that were originally collected for that study. And to better understand the broader context, we also did 10 additional interviews with community members, including healthcare providers, volunteers, and camp leaders. All the interviews were analyzed using in vivo qualitative software. Thematic analysis was done to identify recurring patterns, meanings, and sociocultural contexts that shape these behaviors. And this approach basically allowed women's voices to remain central while also situating their experiences within the broader structural reality. From this, themes emerged. It was fertility and loss, control and gender pressure, knowledge and health fears, economic and geographic barriers, and physical strains, reproduction. Let's now dive deeper into each of these themes. The first theme was fertility and loss. Women's fertility experiences were profoundly shaped by grief, loss, and spiritual understandings of reproduction. Many women described feeling pressure to replace children that they had lost during conflict or displacement, viewing fertility as a form of healing or restoration. Women explained that after losing her children, they would want to reproduce and replace the ones that they had lost in that process. Another described an experience of a miscarriage after 4 months and becoming pregnant again soon after, framing this not as a medical event, but more as ongoing survival. Fertility was also frequently framed as divine will. One participant explained her reproductive future by saying, "It depends on God, I'm praying." This religious framing often reinforced continued childbearing despite emotional and physical strain. These narratives show that fertility decisions cannot be separated from grief, meaning making, and faith. The second theme was control and gender pressure. Reproductive decisions were rarely individual. Many women described a lot of strong influence from husbands, partners, and extended family members. Cultural expectations, particularly preference for sons, also played a very big role. One woman explained that because all of her children were female, she continued seeking pregnancy, saying that she wanted male children. Spousal approval was often also required for contraception. One participant shared that my husband is against it, I will have to do it without his knowledge. This illustrates how women navigate autonomy quietly and sometimes at personal risk. Family planning was also associated with stigma. Women described being criticized and told that they would not respect God if they used contraception, reinforcing silence and a lot of hesitancy around reproductive health care. The third theme was knowledge and health fears. Misconceptions about contraception and reproductive health were actually quite widespread, largely due to the disrupted access to education and healthcare. Conflict interrupted community health teaching and access to reliable information. One healthcare worker explained that many women were misinformed and believed that family planning caused severe side effects. Others had never been taught about things like sexually transmitted infections at all. These fears were not rooted in individual ignorance, but a lot of times in these broken systems where education was lax. Without consistent access to accurate information, women made decisions based on fear, rumor, and lived experience. And this really highlighted that the access of information is really critical when it comes to healthcare. The fourth theme was economic and geographic barriers. So financial hardship and geographic distance to healthcare facilities constrained reproductive decision-making. Women described not being able to afford scans, medications, or even transport to clinics. One participant explained that she could not complete a scan because she lacked money. Another said that they had to go very far to even access reproductive services. Caregiving responsibilities and household labor also often took priority over seeking care, not because the care was unimportant, but at that point, survival demands were more immediate. As one participant explained, family planning for them was tied to caring for children with the little that they had. And this theme really illustrates how reproductive choice is actually inseparable from economic prosperity. The fifth theme was physical strain of reproduction. So reproductive pregnancies and continued caregiving also produced chronic fatigue, stress, and minimal recovery times between pregnancies. Women describe breastfeeding multiple children simultaneously while managing displacement-related stressors. One participant noted that breastfeeding 2 children at the same time caused a lot of significant stress. And these narratives really reveal the embodied cost of reproduction in crisis settings, a burden that's not as visible in policy discussions, but deeply shapes decision-making. Importantly, I also extracted some recommendations from these transcripts, these interviews, about what women felt would be very important aspects or important improvements that would support their reproduction. They called for gender-sensitive, free, and accessible reproductive health care that's more tailored to women's needs. They also emphasized the importance of economic stability. Women described wanting opportunities to farm, work, or start smaller businesses so that they could support their families and hence enable more reproductive decision-making. One woman asked for capital to start a tailoring business, for instance. Another described the urge or desire to remain in one place long enough to farm and care for her children. These recommendations show that women are not passive recipients of aid. They are active agents who understand what they need to improve their health and autonomy if given the opportunity to be heard. This study shows that reproductive decision-making for internally displaced women is not experienced as a free or individual choice, but as a continuous negotiation shaped by trauma, loss, and survival. These women are making deeply personal decisions about their bodies and families while living with grief, constrained autonomy, and economic insecurity, as well as the physical exhaustion of displacement. Their stories make clear that reproduction in crisis is not abstract or theoretical. It is lived, embodied, and often painful. Ultimately, centering women's narratives is not about adding empathy to policy. It's about accountability. Effective humanitarian care must be grounded in the experiences of those it seeks to serve. Listening to women, therefore, is not optional, and it is not secondary to technical solutions. It is a foundation of ethical, responsive, and meaningful reproductive healthcare in the context of displacement. Before I do conclude today, I would like to acknowledge the support that made this research and my research journey possible. The study was supported by funding from the Women and Children's Health Research Institute Summer Studentship Award and the University of Alberta Faculty of Nursing Summer Studentship Award. I'm deeply grateful for their investment in student-led research and in advancing knowledge on women's health in humanitarian contexts. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Oluokwe Miyamoto for her expert guidance, mentorship, and support through this project. This work would not have been possible without her leadership and commitment to ethical, community-centered research. Thank you so much for your time today, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm just going to try and take this off. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As someone with a Nigerian heritage, I can say that was absolutely correct. You can see the relationship between culture and the society in her presentation. Nigerians are very community-based, so the family has a lot of influence in the woman's decision-making. And yes, sons are very important because they pass the name of the ancestors down the line. So yes, thank you so much for